Hey, what's going on? Matt with Ignite Financial. Today we are talking about tariffs. So the Trump tariffs have, taken effect at least a little bit. I know they're still in talks with Canada as of right now. Mexico kind of got a 30-day hold, and then China is going to be down the road a little bit. So there's a lot going on in the first 2 3 weeks of the Trump administration. And tariffs is something that they promised on the campaign trail. So they said, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this for a couple of different reasons. And so the treasurer even talked about, as he got basically elected into his position, that they were going to use tariffs for three basic reasons, right? The first one was going to be to attack the fentanyl trade here in the U.S. So from the perspective of Trump and some others, they feel like Mexico isn't doing their part to stop, the illegal movement of drugs into the United States. Canada has had a very open border when it comes to that, especially, from the COVID moving forward. There has been a lot of movement of drugs and illegals from Canada into the United States. The United States has felt that Canada hasn't done enough to address that, and China provides most of the chemicals used to produce fentanyl. And so, part of it is looking at the supply chain, not just saying, okay, let's stop it after production has been made, but how can we actually curb the production of this? How can we take a look at the chemicals used to produce fentanyl? And then, when it becomes obvious that, a cartel or somebody who's making a mass amount of fentanyl is using those chemicals for the wrong reasons, how can we stop them from getting those, right? And so it's taking a look at the entire chain. And so this was something that, they promised on the campaign trail, because fentanyl kills about 100,000 people in the United States alone every single year. 100,000 people. And the crisis just keeps getting worse and worse. And that's just fentanyl. It doesn't include other drugs inside there. So the first part of the tariffs is they're saying, listen, we're gonna put these in place until you come up with a plan to help stop the flow into the United States and stop the production, right? So with Mexico, what was the cost of the tariff, right? The cost of it ended up being 10,000 soldiers that they put along the U.S. border to stop the flow of illegal immigration, to stop the flow of fentanyl, because a lot of illegal immigration, involved human trafficking and involved the movement of illegal drugs. So it's not just somebody coming over trying to escape the poverty and the situation that they're in. While there was certainly a flow of people that did that, there was a lot of illegal activity that was happening during that illegal immigration as well that was unchecked. And that's what this process is doing, is saying, if somebody's actually coming to the United States, let's go through the proper procedures, processes, and protocols to do so. Let's vet them out and make sure they're not a cartel member, they're not wanted in the Middle East, they're not a murderer who's wanted somewhere in Central America. Let's actually vet these people out before they get into the United States. So that was the first reason. And if you don't know what a tariff is, basically a tariff is adding a tax to anything coming from that specific country. So if the value of the product coming over is $1 and we put a 25% tariff on it, they have to pay basically an additional 25 cents for that to come over. Now that cost does get passed on to consumer, but we'll touch on that here in a second. The second reason that the treasurer mentioned is that they are looking at possible means of closing some of the budget gap and decreasing the deficit that we have. The U.S. as a whole, we've been running a deficit of 6% plus ever since COVID. Historically, prior to that, it rarely exceeded 3% unless we were in a time of war or there was something special going on. So basically, our deficit is running twice of what it normally is running on a regular basis. Now, if our economy was growing at 7%, right, a 6% deficit is not a big deal. But our economy is not growing at 7%. Our economy is still growing at 3% area, which historically is kind of where it's at. So before this becomes a huge issue where we're just owing tons and tons of interest on the debt that we owe, really impeding the ability of the country to grow. We're trying to address that currently, right? Trying to bring that deficit down more in line. And so Treasurer did say that, when he was running, that one of his objectives was to keep the deficit within 3% of GDP. So they did say that they could do a tariff across the board or within specific reasons, just to decrease the deficit, right? So maybe they do a 5% or 3% tariff on certain goods that come across or certain countries. There's all sorts of reasons to address that. And then the third reason for these is for trade, right? So basically trying to level the playing field when it comes to trade. If we look at different trading partners, sometimes we're subsidizing and the trade is not fair. If we are going to have an open trade system and it works globally, in theory, the system would work out great. Basically, you get raw goods from countries that aren't developed yet, send them to more developed countries, and then they can send them to the most developed countries to finalize the product and then produce this finalized good. Everybody makes money along the way. There's efficient means of trading, and everything is good. But what happens is that, if we are looking specifically at trade, we have issues like with the European Union, where we have a $350 billion trade deficit with them currently. Part of the concern is that, they will ship us cars, but they won't take our cars, right? They will, ship us other goods, but they won't take those goods. And so what Trump is trying to do with this is saying, hey, we have an agreement for free trade, but you keep on changing the rules. You're saying, okay, it's free trade, but we're not going to accept this. We're going to protect this by not accepting cars. We're going to protect this by not accepting these farm goods or these dairy products. We're not going to accept certain technology because we only want to produce it in Europe. And so it's not fair. Same thing with China, right? China, we take a massive amount of goods, huge trade deficit with China. But China says, no, we'll do free trade with you, but we're not going to accept this or this or this. And so we can't sell our goods back to them, but they will sell the identical goods to us. So basically what Trump is saying is that in these situations, whether it's with Canada, Europe, China, or other countries, is that we're just trying to level the playing field, saying, hey, we can't have a trade agreement where we're saying it's free trade, but then you won't accept our goods for sale, and now we have this trade deficit, right? So he's just trying to close that gap, and he's using tariffs as a bargaining chip. We saw it work with Colombia when Colombia said they wouldn't take illegal immigrants. Within hours of Trump imposing a tariff on them, they came to an agreement. Same thing with Mexico. I believe it was on Friday that he said we're going to impose tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. Monday there's an agreement to at least postpone it with Mexico to work out final details. And I know Canada's trying to do the same at this point in time. So what impact is it going to have on us as American consumers? Will it increase prices? In the shortest answer is yes. For those goods that are imported from those countries, the prices will increase. So we're going to see a couple things happen. One is they could increase productivity here in the United States if it is cheaper than paying the tariff to bring it over. That's one way that they use tariffs to try to protect jobs. Or we're just going to see that increased cost. Now, the first step of him trying to curb the fentanyl crisis here in the United States is using those as bargaining chips. So they are not expected at this point in time to be long-term tariffs. They could be shorter term in duration, depending on how quickly these countries come to an agreement with the United States. But we are still the largest economy. So countries want to do business with us because if you're Mexico and you have a 25% tariff, but we can go to Ecuador or Brazil and get something very similar or a very similar price without the tariffs, we're going to start dealing and importing those goods instead. So it benefits each country to work with the United States to stop the fentanyl crisis. And then I know the next steps is obviously dealing with the financial deficit that we have here in the United States. And the last step that he's going to deal with when it comes to using these tariffs is to address these discrepancies when it comes to trade. So there's kind of nutshell. Why are these tariffs going on? Are they going to last? The ones that you're seeing right now with Canada and Mexico probably aren't going to last. China could last a little bit longer just because it's 10%, not 25%. That's still going to impact a lot of goods coming in here. Temporarily, it will likely increase prices for some goods. But again, overall, if the net positive for the United States is reducing the fentanyl crisis, getting to fair trade, I think it's going to be a short-term benefit or a short-term hurt that will be a long-term benefit to the U.S. if everything works out. Matthew Myers, Ignite Finance Show. Hit me up with any questions. Love to hear from you guys. Make it a great day.